Good morning, welcome. Please come and take a seat if you're just got back from dropping your children off over the road, or if you've just got back from making a brew online. It's so great to be together again this morning. My name's Sam, and I'm really excited to be carrying on our series that we've been looking at over the last few weeks called A Colourful Life. I'm married to Jenny, and we've got 3 children, and we moved to Letchworth in 2013, which now seems like quite a long time ago. And we feel like we've been part of New Life Church even before we moved, because we started listening to some of the talks online, and we made our first trip down, I remember, on Easter Sunday before we moved into Letchworth into July, and we came to visit the church for the first time when we were meeting still over the road at Howard Hall. And it's just amazing to have been part of this journey since then and see how God has grown the church in so many different ways. And I'd just like to say, if you're joining us recently or for the first time today, I think it's such an exciting time to be part of New Life Church. So I really hope you feel welcome with us this morning. As I said, we're in the midst of this series called A Colourful Life, looking at emotions and how emotions are good things, and they should add colour to our lives, but they shouldn't be controlling our lives. So I just want to give you a quick recap of the different episodes we've had so far, and you can catch up on any of these on our YouTube channel. All the messages are on there. So first of all, we had part 1, how we manage our emotions. Joel set the scene and started us off with our introduction there. And then we had Christopher speak to us about how do we face our fears. Maybe that's something you resonate with. You feel regularly a sense of fear or anxiety in your life. That's a great message to go and listen to. And then last week, Joel talked about how do we deal with sadness. Again, something we've probably all experienced in different degrees in our lives. So I really encourage you to go and catch up on those different episodes so far in the series. But today I'm talking about the subject of anger. Now, when I mentioned this to a few people, they were a little surprised as to why I would be speaking on anger. I'm not particularly known for having huge outbursts or getting particularly red-faced. I'd like to think I'm often fairly calm under pressure, but maybe, like some of you listening, you have had encounters with anger in one or more moments of your life. And I'm pretty certain that none of us would want anger to be a controlling force or a controlling emotion in our lives. Many of us will have seen the damage that it will and it can do. And I go even further to say that nobody who loves you or perhaps spends any amount of time with you would want anger to control your life. And there's probably people that you spend a lot of time with, and you would hope that anger wouldn't be controlling their lives either. Now, many of us may well, at different points in our lives, have experienced being on the receiving end of anger. I just wonder whether you've looked into the eyes of anger, whether you've felt the hand or the foot of anger, whether you've heard the voice of anger. Maybe it's something that brings back some rather uncomfortable memories. But it's important to remember that anger doesn't always have to be loud. The stony silence of anger can be just as powerful. And perhaps, again, the reason why it's a bit of a surprise that I'd be talking about anger is, well, it doesn't normally show. But that doesn't mean it's not going on the inside. We often think immediately when we think about people are angry, we might think about extroverted anger that comes out right in our faces. And maybe to think about this like a fire. We had some of our Johnny's friends round yesterday, and we started a fire in the backyard and toasted some marshmallows. And as we threw on more sticks, suddenly they caught flame. They burst up. And extroverted anger can be like that. You might remember a few years ago, one Letton Hall weekend away, when somebody added petrol to the bonfire. That certainly got things going. But anger can suddenly flash up. Sparks can suddenly fly with extroverted anger. Maybe we think about people hitting the roof or going red, getting the red mist coming down. But that isn't the only form. Maybe you're a bit more like me, appear a bit more calm and collected on the outside, maybe not known to raise your voice. But I'd like to think about this like a balloon being pumped up. Each little thing pushes a little bit more air in. The plastic of that balloon stretches a little more, but it doesn't seem to make much difference. Until eventually there's so much air in there that balloon cannot hold it anymore. And we've all heard this at kids' parties. Bang! Suddenly it pops. Maybe that's been your experience. And we might call this introverted anger. I'm not known for my loud outbursts, but sometimes I can be known for the silence of anger. We've all maybe been around people who seem to be walking around with a cloud over them. They withdraw. They don't engage emotionally. You know something is brewing, like a volcano bubbling away. We can't quite see what's happening. We know something is wrong under the surface. Perhaps instead of shouting, your weapon is silence, and that can inflict just as much hurt, as I well know. But this is folly, it's stupidity. We think that perhaps because we don't show it on the outside, somehow we got it all under control, and maybe there's a bit of pride there of, well, I'm not an angry person. Well, maybe it's not all as it appears to be. As Andy Stanley says, whether you shove it down or shut people down, anger is a bad boss. I'm sure none of us want it to be controlling our lives. But it is worth saying that anger isn't always bad. Anger can be a really important driver for redemptive change. We might call this crusader anger. Now, I'm not going to put on some big white battle dress and go after the crusades, but this can be something that's really important to drive change in our world. It's when we see something that is unjust in the world, someone who isn't getting what they should be, and we get so frustrated by it, we think someone's got to do something about this. And after a while, the reflection starts to think, you know what, I have to do something about this. So maybe as you notice things in your day-to-day lives, where you live, where you work, in the people around you, you start to get those feelings of, this isn't right. Maybe that's God starting to whisper to you, I should do something about this. There's many examples in history. You might know some of these names: William Wilberforce, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King. So many examples of people who have been stirred by what we might call that crusader anger to go and compel them to bring change into society. You see, these people are driven to address when others aren't getting what they deserve. But sadly, the kind of internal anger that breaks our relationships and can railroad our lives is when we become more concerned with when we aren't getting what we think we deserve. And there's a big difference. God wants us to be stirred to action by an anger and injustice for others. But he also wants to help us reflect and see that when our own anger is about us, that's not so healthy. And why is it that anger can make us do or say or think things that we later regret? Maybe you can think of some things now, whether trivial or more significant, that have happened out of feeling angry. Maybe you've crossed a line at some point, and without access to a time machine, you can't go back and change what happened. Well, we're going to look at a short passage from the book of James. James was the brother of Jesus, and he writes this letter to some churches. And in James chapter 3, verse 13, he says this: "Who is wise and understanding among you?" We don't need to have a quick poll, it's okay. And actually, he's sort of setting people up here with this sort of baiting question. Who would put themselves forward as wise and understanding? You see, as we go through life, a sign of wisdom is learning, and learning that what we did yesterday affects today, and what we do today is going to affect tomorrow. If we fail to learn from things, then we fail to grow in wisdom. Now, you might be studying at school. Maybe you're training for a job, a new job, or within your job. Maybe you're just starting a new relationship, or having the joys of raising children at different stages of their lives. Whatever it is, wisdom tells us that as we learn from these things, our lives will be changed going forwards. And the choices that we make will determine what life's going to look like. Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean what sort of house we're going to live in or what sort of job we're going to live in necessarily, but who we are inside. Our choices today are going to affect that. And wisdom tells us that we aren't victims of life. Now, there are things that come out of the blue and hit us, and we might think they're the all-defining things of our lives. But they don't have to be. A couple of examples, one more trivial. Yesterday, I was just about to sit down to sort out my slides for this message, and quick, come to the kitchen, there's water dripping from the light fitting in the ceiling. My favourite. So work out, okay, must be the bathroom, not too bad, it's one of the taps is leaking, okay. So down, as if you've ever done any plumbing, you know it's extreme, it's never convenient. You can never get to anything. So I'm lying down, looking up underneath the sink. There's no light. I'm kind of balancing my phone with the torch on. And I think, actually, no, if water suddenly spills, that's going to go all over my phone. So I find the torch, but it's the torch that Johnny's been playing with, so the batteries have run out of that. So I think, never mind, let's just get on with it. Getting the spanners in there, you can't move anything. Anyway, okay, the washer's gone. Go to Wickes, get a new pack of washers, come home, refitted. So far, so good. Feeling quite happy, actually, how well this piece of DIY's gone. But again, that came out of nowhere. Suddenly, my time for this was taken up with something that I hadn't expected. Something a bit more serious, though. When our second child was born, Emily, a few hours after giving birth, Jenny collapsed, had a stroke, as it turned out. Managed to get her into a wheelchair, back to the hospital bed, and she couldn't move anything on the left side of her body. No control at all. Obviously, we were somewhat surprised and shocked by this. It was a horrendous moment in our lives. Now, thanks God that she's made a complete, full recovery with any recurring symptoms, and that's had a good eventual outcome. But that's not what we expected would happen. That's not what we planned or thought. That wasn't because we'd made some choices. These things happen to us in life. They come out of the blue. But do we think that somehow now we've been victims of life because of these things that just happened to us that seemed completely random, that somehow now the way we live is, oh, well, because this happened to me? No, we don't. We don't. That's not how we've chosen to live. It's certainly changed things, but we don't blame things on what's happened to us. Now, that may be easier to say than some things, and I'm not discounting bad things that have happened to us. But wisdom grows as we learn to reflect on things and how we're going to act in the coming days and weeks and months. So James is asking, who is wise among you? Well, he goes on to say this: let them show it by their good life. He gets a little bit interested there. How can we identify someone of wisdom? And also by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. So you can see wisdom in someone by the way they live and the humility that comes from wisdom. So what does that mean? Well, if you have wisdom, you have to be humble because you realize that you have a lot to learn still. Wisdom teaches you that you don't have it all sorted out, and therefore we have to approach life with humility. Another small story: when I was 17, like most 17-year-olds probably, I was looking forward to getting behind the wheel and getting my freedom. And we got a second car at home, and it was, I remember now, a dark green 5-door Renault Clio, and I think it had electric windows at the front as well, which was quite cool, but somewhat distracting when you're trying to concentrate on driving. But we lived in a small village about 10 miles either way to main town, so a lot of my practicing with any family member I could rope into sitting in the passenger seat and probably gripping onto the handle for dear life was mostly done around the village. And very quickly I felt very confident that, right, I'm ready to get this test done. So I booked my test and got my time through, and it was in the centre of town at 3:30 on a Friday afternoon. So like most busy places, there's cars lined the road, schools are emptying, there's zebra crossings, there's bicycles, it's all happening. And needless to say, my confidence, or rather overconfidence at that point, somewhat unraveled and fairly fantastically failed that test. And I was rather stunned because I was very convinced that, this can't be that hard. I practiced, went into it, and had to quickly learn that actually I needed a bit more humility in my approach to this. Now, I then took another test not too long off. Clearly I hadn't given it maybe enough time to learn and failed that one. And so it's actually 4 years later, after a whole series of lessons nearer to that time, I then took my third test and was very happy to pass in a much calmer manner. But it's just a little example there that, how do we learn through life? As we grow up and mature, we might think, well, that was just then, but that was very real when I was that age. And what does it mean as we go through our lives? How are we learning? And how do we grow in wisdom? So James carries on, and he says, if you harbour bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, these aren't good things to have inside of us. I think most of us would agree. Bitter envy and selfish ambition are not things we would want to be in ourselves, and certainly not in those around us. But if we do, we can so easily deny the truth. Selfish ambition, basically, it's all about me improving with regards to everybody else. Comparing where I am to everyone else, which is so easy to do with the advent of access to non-stop social media. We can always be seeing and relating, where are we? Are we improving? Are we getting better? Are we having a more fun time than everyone else? Have we got more friends? What are we doing that's most exciting? Our lives can become very self-focused. But James says that when these things happen, we can start to deny the truth. See, wisdom does not deny the truth. It faces it and learns from it. But if we don't get this, then we just can get stuck. And we might find that the same things keep coming up in our lives. And we think, why does this keep happening? Perhaps it's because we haven't taken the time to learn from things. And maybe we are living denying the truth. So James goes on to say, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. Now this sounds quite extreme, but it starts to happen if we are in denial of the truth of what's going on in us. Disorder is what we find. I don't necessarily mean disorder from external life events which come out of the blue and knock us for six. I'm talking about what goes on inside of us, what we are thinking about, what is happening in our emotions. Is there disorder in there? And perhaps instead of seeking humility through wisdom, and that steering our life, we find we're constantly thrown off because things are in disorder. And ultimately, James is saying, well, that's going to lead to evil practice. Now, again, sounds pretty horrendous and scary. But the problem is that when we ignore the path of wisdom, selfish ambition starts to take a hold. Then we do become blind to the truth. We start to use things to justify what we do. And as we justify more and more, that can lead us to do more and more things that we never thought we would ever do. Maybe thoughts start to come up that we think, I never thought I would feel like that. I never thought I would have those thoughts towards that person. And we start to justify things. And it can start in small things, can't it? But it's good to take time to reflect and to learn. And instead of things inside your heart guiding you towards growth, they start to be things that come after you. Selfish ambition is something that can come after you. Instead of those emotions adding colour to your life, driving you to do good things for other people, they can start to take control of your life. And not just having impact on your life, but the lives of those around you as well. James goes on to ask another question. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Now, he's thinking about what's the root cause? What do we get so riled up about? Where does that come from? Well, I think we'd often look at this and think, no, you've got this wrong, James. It's not what, it's who. I can give you a big list of who is the cause of these things. It's my parents. They're always giving me a hard time about tidying my room, helping around the house more, getting my work done. Maybe it's my boss. They're always demanding more work. They think I'm working at home and just lounging around. There's more and more expectation, higher standards and tighter time scales. Maybe it's my partner. I feel taken for granted. They just don't make any quality time for me anymore. Or maybe it's my mother or father. They're always coming round, telling me how to live, saying I need to sort this thing out on the house. This should be tidier. What are you doing with the children? What's your plan? Always picking and being negative when I just want some support and encouragement. So we say, don't we, the problem is not a what, it's a who. Well, that's what we might think, but we're actually wrong. It's not a what. It's a what and not a who. And this is about facing up to the truth. James carries on. Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? No. No, they don't. They come from all these people. Come and spend a day with me. I'll show you how difficult these people can be. And maybe they are. Maybe they are difficult. But what causes quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? The truth is, yes, they do. Every single time. The cause is there's something that we want that we aren't getting. Some kind of injustice we feel of things that we deserve, and therefore this gives rise to our anger. And we fight and we control and influence and try and manipulate things to get what we want. But the root of it is we aren't getting what we want. I want to be respected, but nobody seems to listen to me. I want to be noticed, but there's always someone else who seems to come in front and take the limelight. I want to be loved for who I am, but you're always telling me to do better. I wonder if any of those things sound familiar. And then maybe we meet up with a friend for coffee and we say, the situation in my life, this person who's causing these problems for me. And of course, they'll listen and say, yeah, that sounds unfair. Or maybe we post on social media and say, this person or this situation is driving me crazy. I'm getting so angry and wound up about it. And of course, people say, yes, we understand. That doesn't sound good. Maybe we use some of these phrases. I earned it. Therefore, I should get it, surely. That's right, isn't it? But I'm not getting it. So I'm getting riled up. Or maybe they promised. They said they would. And this isn't the first time this has happened. They've let me down. Or maybe it wasn't fair. Nobody listened. In fact, they weren't even playing by the rules. They cheated. It wasn't fair. Now we think we might leave these sort of words behind in childhood. Anyone who's got children will have had the joy of hearing these protests at various times. And we think, these are childish things, but how often do we find ourselves thinking and saying these things? What is part of the problem? Part of the problem is me. And the moment that we face that, we find humility to see that the root and source of our anger is not someone else out there, but is what's going on in here. That we want something that we aren't getting. Now James carries on. You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. Again, quite extreme, maybe. Sometimes you have to say things that are shocking to arrest people's attention. But if we continue to think that the source of all that riles us up, of all the quarrels and the anger is outside and not inside, then, as to quote Andy Stanley says again, you have the potential to take things to an unhealthy, destructive extreme. As long as you think that the problem is him and you can't control him anymore, well, why should I control myself? As long as you think the problem's her, and it's definitely 100% her, and she won't be controlled anymore, then why should I control myself? They should get what he, what she, what they deserve, because I'm not getting what I want. Now, the Bible is so honest about this. James is speaking so honestly. But even in the beginning, the early days of the Bible, we read about Cain and Abel, the first two sons of Adam and Eve. Now they present their offerings to God, and Abel's is judged more favorably than Cain's. You can understand why he might not be too happy about that, but he completely loses the plot. The red mist descends upon him. He wanted something that he didn't get, and therefore he starts to justify his actions. So he kills his brother, thinking somehow probably not that that's going to get him what he wants, but somehow that's going to make him feel better. Clearly it doesn't. Instead, lives with the regret of that action for the rest of his life. How often have we felt in an outburst of anger one way or another that somehow that has helped? Rarely ever, I should think. But it doesn't take long in life for the problems that are inside of us to start controlling our thoughts, our behaviors, and our actions. And this is not the path to wisdom. It's the path to justifying more and more destructive behaviors. You see, if I shake you up, what comes out is what's inside. You can't say, well, if you weren't shaking me, this wouldn't be in there. No. What comes out is what's inside. That's what happens with conflict, isn't it? It shakes us up, it rubs things together, and we see what comes out. And that's the path of wisdom, is reflecting on that and recognizing, wow, what did I just say? How did I react? That maybe shocked me. And maybe it takes a friend, someone else, to come to us and say, you know, what you just said, or maybe what you didn't say, maybe your silence, that was hurtful. And we have to learn to reflect. When we face this, it will change and transform our relationships. It really will. I'm not saying that you're the cause of all the problems, but anger comes from that reaction inside of us, and we feel like we haven't got what we wanted. And it will start to dominate if it's get out of control. It'll affect our friendships, our relationships with those we love. If we're parents, it'll start to impact how we parent. It will start to slowly take control. So we have to acknowledge this is our first step. Change happens when we reflect and learn. And we believe that as we journey together as a people of God, walking through life with one another, when those big events happen, or maybe it's just a small thing we talk about over a coffee, but as we invite God's presence into our lives to help us, change is possible. So I'd like to just invite you to journey with us here at New Life Church. Be part of our small groups. Find people to walk alongside so that we can have those opportunities to grow, so that anger doesn't become something that controls us. Bitterness doesn't become something that controls us. Selfish ambition doesn't become something that controls us. Instead, through humility, we will grow in wisdom, and people will see that in our lives. And we'll start to think more about the injustice towards other people than to ourselves. It will really start to change our lives. So I'm going to pray as we close, but just be expectant that if you felt this morning as you've been listening that something stirred in you, I don't want that thing to be controlling me. It doesn't have to. As we journey together and as God works inside of us, things can change. God, I thank you that there's always hope with you. There's hope for our world, but there's hope for our lives. The things that get stuck inside of us. And maybe it wasn't fair. Maybe it wasn't right. Maybe that person should never have done that thing to us. But sometimes these things cause things to grow in us. Whether it's bitterness, resentment, whether it's our own ambition. But there's always hope with you, God. And I pray now for everyone here and everyone watching. We just take a moment to invite you in with your presence, God. Because as we do that and as we walk with one another, things can change. If we find ourselves feeling like our anger bubbles up and overflows all too often, maybe we feel like we have a short fuse. Or if we feel like we're just pushing it down, we're bottling it up. It's just another pump of the pump into that balloon, and we're not sure when we're going to go bang. You can help us, Lord. We want to live lives with wisdom so that we have capacity to see the needs of others around us. That we would be stirred with that type of anger which causes change for the betterment of others, which isn't focused on the things of ourselves and what we want. So God, I pray for every person that we can turn to you, we can recognize that things need to change in our lives, and where they do, that you can help. And we know that you will help us. You're faithful to do that, Lord. So we just take a moment. All we have to say is a prayer quietly by ourselves. God, help me. I need your help. That is the beginning of asking for help. I don't want these things to control my life. I don't want anger to be a control in my life, because I see how it affects those around me. I see how it affects myself. God, you don't want us to live in that way. So we welcome you in, God. Would you help us to live lives full of wisdom? And as we commit to this community, as we commit to walking life with one another, sometimes that means reflecting back to other people. Sometimes that means being willing to let other people speak to our lives. We know that you will work through us to bring about more of your kingdom, more of your redemption, more of your hope into our lives and the lives of those around us. So we thank you for the promise, for the truth. And we thank you that you will help us in our journey. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, well, we're going to be wrapping up shortly. But if you want to talk about that anymore, or maybe pray for a few moments, I'll just be over the side at the end. We've got a few minutes before, if you've got children over the road, please pick them up by 12. So we've got a little bit of time, nice space just to grab another drink, say hello to some other folks here. It's great just to have a little bit of time. And we're looking forward to seeing you again next Sunday, carrying on our series. Hope you have a great week. It's been great to be together this morning. And yeah, look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much.